Hello everyone, welcome back to another Mechanical Ascension X video. And that's right, we are back with another tier list. Who would have guessed? This time it's the turn of the regular Galactic tier. We did Peculiar Galactics not so long ago, so now we're going to do the regular Galactic tier, which consists of 30 items currently, which I have managed to obtain. Now a lot of them are not exactly prestige proof, so I had to, reincarnate a lot to get these. But now that I have them all, I'm going to review them. Starting with this first one, the Thingamabob. This thing acts as a ramp to a soaring height, and it gives damage to glow. Now, if you do have the item that nullifies damage, it's a pretty good MPU, but that thing is Prestige 100. And by the time you get to Prestige 100, you probably have alternate options to Thingamabob. So, this thing is going straight into C tier, due to the fact that it's not really that usable. Verglass Fairy. This thing is one of the first Galactics you can get after Ascension, and it's actually pretty good because it acts as an early game cleanse for Voided. And there are a good amount of early game items that get Voided that make this thing somewhat viable. However, in the late game, it falls off completely to the existence erasure. So, it's going into B tier, due to the fact that it has some early game potential, but late game it's completely outclassed. Next up is Trial of Terror. This is a upgrade that gets buffed by the nostalgic effect, and it doesn't really have any downsides to it. Its MPU is pretty low, of only 1.9 buffed, and the item you need to buff it is a astronomical, so it's not really usable by the time you get that astronomical, but it does have some use, I think, because there's no downside to it, so it's going into B tier alongside the Verglass Fairy. Ticket Bank, aka your average pay-to-win upgrader, and even then it's still not that good. D tier. Therapeutic Prototype. I have the Ultra of this thing. It gives Electrified and it has synergy with the Synthetic Nanoparator. That is a word. It gives Electrified with a really high upgrade ignore chance, so this thing is really not useful unless you can cleanse the Electrified immediately, which can be done. There are some items that cleanse Electrified pretty easily, but even then, its MPU is so low if you don't buff it that it's almost not worth using. This is not going DT. This is going straight to F. It's almost unusable. Synthwave Triangle. This item's actually somewhat alright. It's buffed by Remix, so if you have the Shadow item, this thing gets up to 2.1 MPU, which is pretty good. And even without that, it's still an okay item. It's not the best, so I'm going to put it into A tier, as it's pretty good. Now here's the item that goes along with that terrible item, the Synthetic Nanoparator. This thing has a slightly better MPU than that, but it also gives Electrified, so yeah, it can sit right down in F tier alongside it. Next up is Swordstruck Spires, one of the rarest ones, and it gives a damage effect. Its MPU is alright on its own, being 1.8, similar to Synthwave Triangle, I believe. And it's, however, its max MPU, once again, can only be really reached with that Prestige 100 item, so I'm going to put it into B tier, since it's a little better than the Thingamabob, but it's still not very usable like Synthwave Triangle, which has a pretty easy to get buff to it, which is at... Well, actually, it's not a buff, it's more of a nullify. Well, the thing that buffs damage is actually a item, so I'm actually going to change these to upper tier because I'm thinking wrong. Damage nullify is at 100, but the item that buffs it is actually earlier, so Thingamabob's moved up to B, Swordstruck is moved up to A. Yeah, my bad on that one. Steam Powered Gramophone. Buffed by Remix, again, another pretty easy buff to get, but its MPU isn't exactly as good as Synthwave, so I'm going to put it into B tier. Soul Sanctum. This thing is not very usable. If you have something that gives Glow, which is a pretty easy buff to get, then it can be buffed up to 24 times. However, its Ghastly buff is where it falls off. Ghastly is not an easy buff to get a hold of, as it's given from a reincarnation item, so you really need its Ultra if you want to use that consistently. That and it's kind of large and its MPU otherwise is pretty bad, so it's going into C tier. Next up is a portable, the Recalcitrant Predomination, which does 4 times, can sometimes kill your ore, gives radioactive but doesn't change the size of your ore. And it's buffed by Cursed. And it can get up to 9 times with my current buffs. And the fact that it's a portable alone already places it pretty high. Its explosion chance is not exactly game-breaking, and it's actually a good multiplier. And it can get even better if you have the Tartarus. So, although its multiplier is not absolutely amazing though, so I'm going to put it into A tier. But its Prat is a very high A tier, almost S tier with that item. Next up is Ravaging Roscoe. This thing has a good MPU when buffed with damage up to 2.1, which I believe is a similar MPU to the Swordstruck. I think it's actually slightly less than Swordstruck Spies at max MPU. But the thing's also a nostalgic buff too that's required to get up there. Well, this is just damage. So if you have the Radiant Pearl, you can buff it up. Well, actually I have the shiny of it, so it's buffed up even further, which I'm going to have to take into account. So I'm going to put this into the A tier alongside Swordstruck Spires, as it's pretty good actually. Plague's Lord Murder. D tier. Next, we have the Otherworldly Thesaurus. This item is a pain to use. It's got an max MPU of 2.3 with an average of 2.1. But that's because it's got a random effect, which you get one of these effects, and some of these are not exactly optimal. So it makes it kind of hard to use and kind of hard to clean up if you use it. That and its average upgrade is okay for its size, but it's very difficult to use, so I'm going to put it into B tier. Next up is Malware. This is an item that has a charge effect that makes it worse the more it's placed down, bringing it down to 0 times, and its MPU isn't even that great to begin with. So that is going straight to F tier. It's basically unusable. Next up is Marshmallow Mantle. This item requires fuel to use. So if you have a steampunk item, which can buff the fuel effect, then this item can get up to a pretty good multiplier of 40 times. And if you have Scorch, you can buff it even further because it gives fire, getting up to 2.2 MPU, which is actually not terrible. And it's the fire's a pretty easy one to thing, but and Steampunk's not that hard to get. It's actually an early game. This is actually the first Galactic to go straight to S tier. Manokitsoda Metaplasia. This item is a complex one. It gives Bubbly, which can be buffed with a Chick Hideaway and nullified with a Sunken Submarine, so not terrible, but its MPU is kind of lacking, so I'm going to put this into B tier. That and it's also a tiny conveyor. Moleculous Inoculator. This gives poison to your ore, not too hard to get rid of, but its MPU, again, is even worse than Minikid, so I'm going to put this into C tier, as it's kind of large. Lunar Calligraphy. This is probably the first Galactic that you'll get, and it's really awful. It's going straight to F. It's not good at all. But I guess, well, it has some early game use, so I'm going to put it into D. So, it's not absolutely awful. This one, Kitchen Nightmares. It has got one of the higher upgrades of Galactic tier, however it gives damage and is buffed by Nostalgic. It's kind of in the similar thing to Swordstruck Spires, so it's going to go in the same tier as Swordstruck Spires, the A tier. Jalapeno Refiner. This gives hot, fated, and colour to your ore, and its MPU is not exactly good. Fated is exactly the same as fire. It's got a 1.7 MPU though, so I'm going to put it into C tier. It's not exactly useful, even if it does look amazing. Horizon Particulizer. Ascension 1 Prestige 6 upgrader gives Voided to your ore. MPU wise, it's not that good. So once again, C tier. Voided is pretty easy to take care of. You can either use Verglass Fairy or Existence Erasure, but it's not that good. And here's one that I absolutely hate. Heavenly Rose. It requires a cannon and gives glow, which can be used to buff the Soul Sanctum, but the fact that you need a cannon for this kind of makes me put it in D tier. It would be C tier if it was a normal grounded upgrader, but it's not, so yeah. Gate to Paradise. This item kind of bad. It's based on your overall playtime. Once you play the game for 8 hours, you get its maximum upgrade of 8 times, and even that gives only 1.6, so it's got no downsides though, so I'm going to put it into C tier. Here's one of the other portables, the Floppy Little Flounder. This gives 3 times, can get buffed up to 4.5 because it's got a bubbly, and it actually cleanses fire and poison, and also fishiness, whichever gives that. So because of the fact that it has those cleansers, and the bubbly's not too bad, you can deal with it pretty easily, I'm going to put this straight up into S tier. Good job, Floppy Little Flounder. Fatal Exception 1.26, and it has an effect called Fatal, which gives extra multiplier based on your jump power. So if you have a good infuser, it can get up there, but even then its MPU is not exactly good, and having a good infuser could actually take you some time. So I'm going to put this into C tier, since it is somewhat usable. Desolate Ring. This used to be a reincarnation item when I was playing, and it still kind of sucks. The fact is this is going straight to F tier. I think the only reason is that it's Galactic is because of its amalgamation that gives global fuel to every ore on your base. But on its own, this Desolate Ring is absolutely awful. Darude Sandcube, 1.5 MPU, gets up to 1.7 because it has damage to Frozen. And the thing is, this item is obtained too late on in the game to be usable. That, and I believe it also has a weird conveyor where it's it's raised. Yeah, D tier. Bomb Detector. This item is 1.7, has damage that can bring it up to a really good MPU actually. So it's on similar vein to these lot, and it's going up there, A tier. And here we have the final item, the Albinal Infector. This gives nausea, which gives it upgrade disparity, which I absolutely despise, and it's going into F tier based on that alone. So that is your final tier list of all the Galactics. In F tier we have Albinal Infector, Desolate Ring, Malware, Synthetic Non-Operator, and Therapeutic Prototype. In D tier we have Ticket Bank, Plague Lord's Murder, Lunar Calligraphy, Heavenly Rose, and Darude Sandcube. C tier we have Fatal Exception, Gate to Paradise, Horizon Particulizer, Jalapeno Refiner, Malicious Inoculator, and Soul Sanctum. B tier we have Verglass Fairy, Trial of Terror, The Thingamabob, Steam Powered Gramophone, Overworldly Thesaurus, and Manakit Soda Metaplasia. A tier we have Bomb Detector, Kitchen Nightmares, Ravaging Roscoe, Recalcitrant Predomination, Swordstruck Spires, and Synthwave Triangle. And in S tier we only have two items, which is the Marshmallow Mantle and the Floppy Little Flounder. However, this does not conclude my video just yet. Ever since my Peculiar Galactic video came out, there's been some items that have been re-tiered to particular Galactic. So yeah, I'm going to bring back up the Peculiar Galactic tier list. And we are back. I have brought up my Peculiar Galactic tier list. As you remember, Forced Upgrade is a thing that likes to move all over the place. Now, there were some items that moved up to this tier. Well, by some I mean two, which was the Unstable Absorber and the Spectra Abstractity. Abstracity. Okay. These two were regular Galactics when I made that tier list, but they've since been re-tiered to Peculiar Galactic, so we're going to add them to the tier list. Spectra Abstractity is a item that gives sparkles, but it's only got an MPU of 1.7 as compared to this item, which has 2.08 in maximum. So this is actually going to go into C tier right next to Hyperlight Reality PS. No, it's going into D tier next to Eula's. No, C tier. It's got sparkles. I'll let it off. This thing, however, it's a static that gives static acceleration to everything on your base, and even its ultra does that. But it's usable, and it's actually really good. It's pretty much for necessary speed setups. S tier. So that is the revised Peculiar Galactic tier list with Crate Generator and Forced Upgrade in F, Eul's Eradicate in D, Hyperlight Reality Piercer and Spectra Abstractity, whatever it's called, in C tier, All on Screen in B tier, Rocket Fuel, Mastermind Lecture and Interface of Progress in A, and Ninovia Mine, Dimensional Postcard, After Image, and Unstable Absorber in S tier. And that concludes the video. I'll see you in the next one.